In a rare case of good news for some federal workers, today, a judge ordered multiple federal agencies to reinstate probationary workers who were fired by the Trump administration last month, saying the process it used to fire them was not legal. U.S. District Judge William Alsup also had this harsh rebuke for the administration over the mass firing, saying it is sad, a sad day when our government would fire some good employee and say it was based on performance when they know good and well that's a lie.
Señores, realmente las últimas semanas han sido de locura. Miles de personas perdiendo su trabajo sin una razón justa. Simplemente porque alguien decidió que ya no quería que sigan ahí. Exactamente, amigos, es lo que pasó con cientos de empleados federales, ni bien empezó la administración de Trump. Y esto ha ocurrido hasta recientemente. Aquí viene lo bueno porque un juez, en estas últimas horas, ha dicho alto y ha ordenado que sean reinstalados. Sean bienvenidos a Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Amigos, hoy veremos cómo un juez acaba de ordenar la reincorporación de trabajadores que estaban en periodo de pruebas y fueron despedidos en las últimas semanas por la administración de Donald Trump. Así que los invito a que se queden hasta el final de este video porque traemos detalles muy interesantes. Bueno amigos, para que puedan entenderlo rápidamente de lo que estamos hablando, resulta que Donald Trump acaba de llevar una serie de despidos masivos dentro del gobierno federal. Eso es lo que se habla en las últimas semanas. Muchos de estos despidos se justificaron con el argumento de eficiencia gubernamental, de supuestamente rendimiento laboral. Pero amigos, muchas de estas personas fueron removidas simplemente porque no eran leales a él, porque no encajaban en esta nueva agenda política. Ahora un juez federal ha declarado que estos despidos fueron ilegales y ha ordenado que estas personas sean reinstaladas en sus puestos de trabajo ya mismo. Quiero que veamos este fragmento del video para que tengas una idea un poco más clara de lo que está pasando. Así que veamos este clip.
In a rare case of good news for some federal workers, today, a judge ordered multiple federal agencies to reinstate probationary workers who were fired by the Trump administration last month, saying the process it used to fire them was not legal. U.S. District Judge William Alsup also had this harsh rebuke for the administration over the mass firing, saying it is sad, a sad day when our government would fire some good employee and say it was based on performance when they know good and well that's a lie. Joining me now, Georgetown law professor Michelle Goodwin, who teaches constitutional law, and Noah Bookbinder, president of CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. You know, Noah, sometimes I feel like we are living in the upside down pretty much every day. And then now and again, you get a ruling like this from the judge that makes me think, okay, there's still people who get it and are willing to hold the line.
Yeah, actually, when people, whether it's states like your last guest or organizations, are going to court and saying, hey, these things you're doing are not allowed under the law. And that's really true particularly with these cuts under the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, this DOGE entity. Courts are overwhelmingly finding that the administration is violating the law and ordering it to stop. So once you can get into court, actually the news is often a lot better. The challenge is that they're doing so many of these things that are illegal that it's hard to get into court on all of them, and it's hard to do it fast enough.
Right. You have a Maryland judge who also seems open to reinstating fired probationary workers. There's still workers, though, who are, I mean, first of all, there are workers who are sitting around wondering, do I get to go back to my job? Right. And then even if you get to go back to your job, you wonder how long it is, whether or not you are now working in a hostile environment. These judges should not have to be handling all these cases.
No, they shouldn't have to be handling these cases, and it is devastating for the morale of these employees. And it's important that we remind people over and over again that we've seen unconstitutional actions by this administration, illegal actions by this administration, that simply because the president puts words on paper and signs his name to it does not make it lawful. And that's what we're seeing from these judges.
You know, it is telling to me, Noah. I always argue this president, I do think he was elected to shake things up. I think there's a subset of voters who thought this government doesn't work. He's going to go in there. He's not just shaking things up. He is messing things up. I think you see that very acutely with DOGE. You see mistakes posted on their website over how much money they claim to be saving the country with their cuts. Now you have the New York Times reporting that instead of learning from those mistakes, they're just making it harder for people to find their mistakes. They are going against their promises of transparency. I think that tells you, Noah, everything you need to know.
Absolutely. I mean, this is this entity which Elon Musk, who apparently is in charge of this thing, said would be the most transparent part of the government we'd ever seen. And instead, we don't know what this entity is and what they're doing. The one bit of transparency that they have had is they put up on their website a list of places that they're saving money, and they're claiming billions of dollars in savings. It turns out when reporters have dug into what they put up there, that they found really kind of amazing mistakes, like they mixed up millions and billions, or they took credit for contracts that were canceled by earlier presidents and have been dead for years. And when these mistakes started to be pointed out, instead of fixing them, saying, "Oh, we're making a mistake. We're gonna get good information to the American people," instead, they took all the identifying information off of that website, so you can't tell what they're claiming. You can't tell if these numbers are real or not. That is, the opposite of transparency, and it really goes to show that they're not looking to be evaluated by whether they're helping the American people. They want to tell their story, have us accept it, and not ask any questions.
Michelle, there are those who are rightfully surprised by how brazen they have been, by the volume of their attacks and what they've done. You are not surprised at all.
No, I'm not. And any of us that had access to Project 2025, who heard about it, should have known that this is a blueprint that even though Donald Trump tried to distance himself from it, this is what we see unfolding, those 900 pages that said the ways in which they would basically dismantle the government, dismantle democracy as we know it. That is what we're seeing. And the double talk of, on one hand, caring about free speech and transparency, and on the other hand, literally painting over words like women, woman, gender, directives that say, here are sets of words that federal employees may not use. That's inconsistent with our Constitution and constitutionalism. So this is
Ok, amigos, lo primero que hay que destacar es que esto no es un caso aislado. Donald Trump ya ha demostrado una y otra vez que su estilo de gobierno es más cercano al de un empresario autoritario, ¿no?, que al de un presidente democráticamente elegido. Para él, el gobierno no es un conjunto de instituciones con reglas y normativas. Es como una empresa donde él es el dueño y él puede despedir a quien quiera. Aquí hay un problema porque cuando comenzaron a despedir a estos empleados federales, no se hizo de acuerdo con la ley. Intentaron vendernos la idea de que era por eficiencia, ¿no? Pero la realidad, amigos, es que estos despidos tienen motivaciones políticas. Es decir, si trabajas en el gobierno y no estás de acuerdo con él, estás en la cuerda floja. Lo más peligroso de este tipo de acciones es que crean un ambiente de miedo dentro del gobierno. Si los empleados públicos sienten que pueden ser despedidos por razones políticas, entonces dejan de hacer su trabajo de manera independiente. Empiezan a actuar con miedo a las represalias. Amigos, básicamente un paso hacia un gobierno autoritario. Sé que algunos podrían argumentar lo siguiente. Bueno, cada presidente tiene derecho, ¿no?, a elegir a su propio equipo. Y sí, es cierto. Pero yo creo que hay una diferencia abismal entre cambiar altos funcionarios de confianza y despedir en masa a empleados públicos solo porque no son leales a la figura del presidente. Un gobierno funcional necesita de estabilidad, necesita profesionalismo, no busca una lealtad ciega. ¿Qué podemos aprender de este pequeño concepto? Cuando un presidente trata al gobierno como una empresa privada, el resultado es muy, pero muy simple: caos institucional. No podemos permitir que el gobierno sea utilizado como una herramienta para castigar a quienes no estén de acuerdo con él. Y lo más importante, ¿no?, que las instituciones democráticas tienen que ser protegidas de cualquier intento de manipularlas con intereses personales. Pero bueno, quiero saber qué opinan ustedes. ¿Creen que la decisión de este juez fue la correcta? ¿Qué opinan del tema de los despidos masivos en el gobierno? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en los comentarios. Mientras, pasamos a la siguiente noticia, porque, señores, Elon Musk ha vuelto a reaparecer. Y bueno, por un momento parecía que iba a quedarse callado, ¿cierto? Aunque solo fuera por un poquito. Creo que tuvimos un par de días en los que no estuvo tan activo como de costumbre. Pero desafortunadamente eso cambió hace poco. Está de vuelta haciendo lo que mejor sabe hacer: atacar al gobierno, atacar a los ciudadanos. Cuando me refiero a gobierno me refiero a demócratas, ¿no? Atacar a quien defiende lo correcto. Exactamente es lo que hizo en su último berrinche en Twitter, o bueno, X, contra el senador Mark Kelly, a quien llamó de traidor, simplemente por apoyar a los aliados ucranianos. Por supuesto, Mark Kelly no iba a dejar que esto pasara sin responder, pero también creo que esto viene porque Mark Kelly ha sido uno de los pocos que han desafiado a Elon Musk de una manera constante. Y ahora, pues, en una entrevista le dio una respuesta contundente, así que veamos este clip.
Someone who just got back and was on the ground, what are your takeaways about a 30-day ceasefire and whether or not that is something that you think will be realistic?
Well, it would be a really positive outcome from the meeting in Saudi Arabia. I will say I don't think we needed to be here with this reset. What happened last week or 2 weeks ago now in the Oval Office put us in a really bad place from a negotiating standpoint, giving away NATO membership, giving away territory before the negotiations started is not where you want to be walking into a negotiation. And then cutting off weapons to the Ukrainians and cutting off their intelligence. We spoke a lot about that when I was there over the weekend, talking to F-16 pilots, talking to some military commanders about the impact that that had. So that all was very unproductive. Now we're back to a good place, and I hope that we can get the Russians to agree to this. We don't know if they will, but I think folks need to keep in mind that they have broken ceasefires before, and we're going to have to hold them to it. So there should be provisions in there for us to do that.
Does it help strengthen Ukraine's hand, which I know you've been worried about, since they did restart the sharing intelligence and also the military weapons as well, the military aid?
Does it strengthen their hand? I think it does now, but they lost something over these days. So right when I was there, we talked about, I met with F-16 pilots, and they didn't have the overhead imagery that they need. They didn't have the entire picture of certain things that are very important when you're planning a strike that was taken away from them. There were, because of intelligence that they did not have, it was harder for them to react to ballistic and cruise missile attacks. So those things have an impact. We don't know for sure if additional Ukrainians died because of this, but it is possible.
Yeah. The one thing with this happening and the movement here, and I know one thing you'd been concerned about is Ukraine having to give up land. Secretary Rubio said that realistically they do believe Ukraine will have to give up. It will go to pre-2014 borders when Russia went into Crimea and illegally annexed it. But on this situation overall, Trump has argued that you have to at least talk to Putin to try to get to the table here. Do you believe that that is helpful, given there weren't conversations between Biden and President Putin after Russia invaded?
Well, of course, at some point you have to talk to him. But I always think we should want to negotiate from a position of strength, not weakness. Giving stuff up early just shows that we're weak. I think the president thought he was, showing some strength when they were in the Oval Office bullying Zelensky. That was not productive. That's not who we are as a country. This stuff should not be done in front of a camera. But I think right where we are right now, I think Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio made some progress. Let's try to continue the progress. Let's not blow things up again. Let's not go back and I mean, who knows what could happen, but we don't need to stop the weapons support and the intelligence. That would be a mistake to go down that road again. I mean, you see this with tariffs, right?
Yeah.
Bouncing back and forth all over the place. Let's be consistent.
Remarkable to hear you say, though, that you're at least hopeful about where these talks could go. We'll see, obviously, how Russia responds. When you got back from Ukraine, you posted about your trip, an incredibly lengthy thread that everyone should read, I think, just of what it was like on the ground. Yeah. Elon Musk responded by calling you a traitor.
He did. What? Well, that
You're
was
a combat veteran.
That was kind of my reaction when I was flying over Iraq, getting shot at, or flying in the space shuttle. Never once for a second did I think somewhere down the road somebody's going to call me a traitor. But Caitlin, this isn't really about me, and what I'm really
not just
concerned.
Somebody.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a guy with a lot of power, a lot of influence over this government. I think it says a lot about him. It says much more about him than it does about me. But what really concerns me is veterans that he is firing without cause from the government. These are public servants. I had a disabled veteran in my office the other day that had recently received an excellent performance report, and 3 weeks later, Elon Musk fires him through an email because of poor performance. That's wrong. That's not fair. Fired him without cause. It has ruined his life. And there are 6,000 veterans just like him.
We also saw Todd Young and Lindsey Graham pushed back on what Elon Musk had to say, calling you a traitor. Are you surprised that you haven't heard from more Senate Republicans, more of your colleagues?
I've heard from them in the Armed Services Committee in the ante room today.
What did they say to you?
Well, we're kind of joking about it. People are. I got to be careful what I say, you know, in public about what my Republican colleagues say, but. You know, we were talking about what he said about me, and it would have been interesting for you to watch if you were in there.
Why? Because they were essentially, well, I mean, without naming them.
We get along very well.
Them, but
I've got very good relationships with my Republican colleagues, and I would say they don't like this kind of behavior.
The Senate Republicans don't like Elon Musk calling you a traitor.
There are a number of them that came up to me to talk to me about this. And yeah, of course, they're not happy with this.
But they didn't say anything.
I mean, this guy has a very powerful job in the United States government. He's got tremendous influence. After the president, I don't think there's somebody with more influence right now over the federal government than Elon Musk. And he's wasting his time on Twitter, insulting people, insulting veterans, calling me a traitor, calling other people's names. Is this a serious person? I don't think he is. So why do you give him this influence? And by the way, I think it's really important for the American people to know that the reason he's doing all this, the reason he's firing all these people, is so he can create some room so when they give this big giant tax cuts to billionaires, it doesn't add as much money to the deficit and the debt as it would otherwise.
Para muchos, Mark Kelly llegó a ser considerado como un verdadero héroe estadounidense. Y bueno, para muchos hasta creo que no existe algo más patriótico que servir a tu país, ser astronauta, actualmente senador. Es un tipo que transmite, ¿no?, un cierto nivel de calma y seguridad. Bueno, pues ahora Elon Musk lo llama de traidor por defender a los ucranianos, por preocuparse, ¿no?, por la democracia. Elon Musk ni siquiera es estadounidense, para empezar. O sea, él, yo creo que no debe ni de entender lo que significa ser estadounidense. Pero claro, Donald Trump hace unos días lo llamó de patriota, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Por robarles el país. Hablando de robos, parece que Elon también decidió hacerlo de una manera muy peligrosa, ¿no?, al menos lo más posible. Quiero que veamos un clip con Rachel Maddow, la cual explica exactamente todos los detalles. Veamos esto.
Trump has meanwhile just cut our support for nuclear non-proliferation detectives all over the globe. These are the people who hunt for those who are trying to illicitly acquire nuclear weapons or materials. They work all over the world, including Iran. Trump has just cut our funding for those activities. Wired magazine reports that Trump and Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon are about to cut 75% of the Defense Department programs that aim to stop proliferation of nuclear weapons, as well as chemical and biological weapons. NBC News reports tonight that Trump additionally is just going to fire 8 to 10% of all the generals and admirals at the senior levels of the United States military, because sure, why not? That one he's going to put a bow on when he delivers it to Red Square, I think, right? That one's extra special. But amid all the things going on with our flipping sides and us now berating and hurting our previous allies, while we take very, very ambitious steps to destroy not only our alliances, but our own military power, our intelligence relationships, and our own economy. While we're doing that, right? Gutting the U.S. federal government, hurting the military, hurting our intelligence relationships, ruining our alliances, and trashing the economy. While we're busy with all of those things, there's just one other thing that kind of, I think, brings all sides of the news today together. Remember at the top I said stick a pin in that? I mentioned that there's this new reporting on the impact of what Trump and Musk are doing at the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, amid all these plane crashes and the crisis they are causing by firing all the people who keep the planes in the sky. At the Atlantic magazine, Isaac Stanley Becker reports on a SpaceX employee who has now been installed at the FAA, quote, to deploy equipment from Starlink across the FAA's communication network. Starlink, of course, Elon Musk's satellite internet terminals company. The directive, quote, promises to make the nation's air traffic control system dependent on Elon Musk, using equipment that experts say has not gone through strict U.S. government security and risk management review. So just put those two things together. Well, we've got, this weekend, Elon Musk threatening our ally Poland, which is more than doubling its army, talking about nuclear weapons, and preparing to be invaded by Russia. We've got Elon Musk threatening them, saying, you know, my Starlink system, my system, is what is determining the course of the war right now. So be quiet, small man. He actually said that, be quiet, small man. It's my technology, my Starlink system that is deciding the war. I'm the one. And while we've got Musk behaving that way against one of our allies when it comes to Starlink, we apparently are simultaneously giving over all U.S. airspace to Starlink as well by letting him take over U.S. air traffic control technology at the FAA, installing his own company in place of the companies that have been cleared by the FAA to provide that technology. Not to put too fine a point on it, but as noted today at The Atlantic, quote, Starlink presents many risks, said one expert. Quote, part of the risk is that Musk could simply choose to switch the devices off.
Señores, esto debería de generar miedo, especialmente cuando Elon Musk y Donald Trump solo quieren hablar del tema del DI, ¿no? Pero bueno, Elon se está adjudicando contratos que no merece, solo porque tiene conexiones con el gobierno. ¿No les parece, no, que esto es una versión de MAGA un poco más elevada? El problema no solo está a nivel nacional. Elon Musk quiere extender su influencia a nivel estatal, a nivel local. Está intentando comprar un asiento en la Corte Suprema. Creo que hemos hablado de esto antes con el tema de Wisconsin. Pero bueno, yo creo que no hay que permitir que se salga con la suya, ¿no? Actualmente, si no me equivoco, es Susan Grifford la que está compitiendo contra el radical republicano al que Elon Musk está financiando con millones de dólares. Pues bueno, es importante, ¿no?, entender lo que esto significa y, como siempre, intentar apoyar. Si eres de Wisconsin, eres demócrata, deberías preocuparte por esto. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Como siempre, amigos, si me quieren apoyar, regálame un like, comparte el video con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.